Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Soaring Through Chaos. And the reason we have these conversations is because we are in chaotic times. In fact, it's so chaotic that sometimes I even forget which show I am on. There's so much going on in everybody's life. And Zoom and all these online forums seem to be our virtual second life now. But the reality is that it is challenging. Every day we get news from the health departments and all that, and it's not always pleasant. There's that concern about what could go wrong with people's health, friends and family, jobs, and also the means of livelihood, finding meaningful work. But amid all this, we know that during these challenging times, it's possible to calm down and find meaning. So that's why I talk to people who to me are role models in helping find meaning, make sense out of what's going on. One of them is Kunal Sood. I got to know Kunal at the Center for Compassion at Stanford, and he is always, this is my first time talking to him one on one, really. I've always met him in group settings at the center. He's always smiling and bubbly, and I want to know all about him. So here we are talking. Kunal, please tell us about you.
Oh, thank you. It's been a decade almost since I was at the Center for Compassion and Altruism, and God bless Dr. Doty invited me as a fellow, and I had the privilege of meeting some of the most extraordinary minds and hearts on the planet, largely devoting their life's work to compassion, starting, of course, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was such a blessing to actually meet him in person. But then, I got to know Sadhguru and Amma. I got her gracious hug, and Shishi Ravi Shankar. And of course, I'd known of these people all my life growing up in India, but I actually had the divine blessing of meeting them, not just as figureheads or uh, public figures of massive compassion and altruism, but as human beings. And that's really something that I was very touched to see how humane they are at their center and how they live their lives in service of something that's much larger than themselves. So
So
that's
what brought you to CCARE, and how did you get involved in these kinds of research as well as work? Something must have. Were you always a compassionate, joyful human being, or were there shifts in your life?
I'd say that's a good question. Huh. I have to like tickle my ear to think about that one. Because if you ask me, was I always compassionate? I think innately I was born with a good family to teach me compassion. I always say that I was the black Labrador born into you know, a beautiful bunch of golden retrievers. And despite my differences, my mother and my dad cultivated in me compassion, love, altruism, uh, and the resilience of building both the moral courage as well as the ethical foundation to never give up in life. So I think I was born with that as a gift that my parents gave me. So it was inculcated into me. But I think my life's experiences, the pain especially, the suffering, emboldened and molded that compassion in action. So I feel like, my life's work has largely been informed by my life's experience as a child in the world of, just being a go-giver. And I mean, this is my dream to become a go-giver. We pride ourselves on being go-getters, which is fine. I'm not against go-getting, but I feel like the gift in life is when you can go from being a go-getter to a go-giver. And that's something that I think was inculcated in me at a young age, from one, from my parents, and two, from the few teachers and a few peers that I love dearly in my life. So I think it was very much a combination of being not born this way, but cultivated this way throughout my life. Yeah.
And Kunal, every time I see something about you, you're up to another interesting initiative. So, and you have a long list of things you've done. You work with a variety of people. on
Yeah.
East Coast, West Coast, everywhere. Tell us a little bit about your story, please. It's so fascinating. And I
Okay.
have a
So
similar thing, but
yeah.
I'm really fascinated by the kind of work you've done over the last more than a decade.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it'll be exactly a decade. As of next month, it'll be exactly a decade since I started as a curator. I just finished my practicum and training at UCSF, which is where we've met in San Francisco. And I was at UCSF School of Global Health Sciences. And I was training as a global health scientist, and I just finished my work as a scientist in the slums of Mumbai. But I think if you want to go to my story, I grew up as a very obese child. For some reason, I think it was because of my learning disorder or maybe a combination of factors. I always had this issue with one, attention, and secondly, just belonging, right? So I used to ground myself, and also I have to take some responsibility in that I would get a lot of good food and I would eat it, at home. So some some of the best food, as you know, is back home in India, and I had an abundance of it, and that didn't help my life's trajectory in a health sense. So I'll never forget, about 16, my poor mom, I came home from this, the club, which was like the family club around the corner, and I had something called a chocobar in my mouth, which is equivalent to a Haagen-Dazs in this country, an ice cream in my mouth. And she was weeping because apparently a doctor had seen me in the Madras Club and said to my mom that your son will die in the next 3 years if he doesn't contain his behavior around food and his lifestyle around obesity. He's too morbidly obese. And my poor mom was crying, and I didn't understand why she was crying. And then she got my friend's name wrong, in the fact that she was trying to tell me whose father it was, and she got the name wrong. So as I kept asking her, who's Zarban? It was Farhan. And she just got more and more frustrated. And she basically lost her temper with me because she was so sad that she had heard this. Um, and I think that was, the impetus for me to realize that I have to change. And then, I at that point I took it upon myself to have the first iteration of transformation in my life. So I live my life very much on the premise of making the impossible possible, right? And my first task was to lose 120 kilos, which is close to 245 pounds. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, I put on like 130 of those pounds all back already. So, actually, 150, unfortunately, since COVID, I've put on 20 pounds as well. And, the truth is, when I lost the weight, right, that was my first time ever that I saw my own ability to make the impossible possible, because it really did seem impossible at the time. I was like, how am I going to lose weight? I don't know the first thing about weight loss. I'm only 16 years old, I was born this way, because I really thought I was born that way. Like, I was born fat, and I was born to be obese. But then, through training, and we feel this is a big part of my life is training. And I really pride myself, and I pride the idea of being in training. Through deep training, I was able to transform myself in a physical sense. And then, that allowed me to live into my deeper, massive transformative purpose in life. And when I lost the weight, that kind of became the spark that allowed me to do things that uh, people deemed as impossible as well. Like, for example, I wasn't like a genius, techie, highly educated individual. In fact, I sucked at school. I went to DAV higher secondary school, and I was lucky to pass mathematics. And I always asked why. And as you might know, in India, if you ask why, you get thrashed. Or at least back then we used to get thrashed.
It's still that way sometimes. It's still that way.
Well, at least thank God they've
Fair.
stopped beating kids up in school. I mean, I think they've at least on paper they've passed an ordinance that, teachers cannot beat the kids in school anymore, which is nice, but back then it was, gloves off. Anything's
Yeah,
allowed.
yeah,
So for me, that was one of my most pivotal experiences. Was the education in India didn't suit me. I don't think it's bad. I think the education in India is extraordinary. I have deep respect for like those guys who can study by rote and become geniuses. And I mean, if you see some of them like Sundar Pichai and Satya Nadella and all these guys who went to IIT or went to DAV, that's a feeder school to IIT, they're running the world's most amazing company. So I'm in no way saying that the system is broken. I just feel like I was not able, I was broken in that I couldn't fit into that system. So in order to make my or unlock my exponential potential, my mom saw very early on that I don't belong in the Indian ecosystem as far as education is concerned. I need to go out. So very early in life, I was sent to Singapore, United World College, and unfortunately, I didn't make it there because there were these fires. And at that time, I was still fat. I was still not. I wasn't fit. I was, I'd lost a little bit of weight, but I hadn't lost enough weight. And I almost died actually because the fires almost killed me. And that's when I really decided, okay, I don't want to lose my parents. I don't want to let them down, And that's when I decided to take it to the next level. My parents sent me to New Zealand to finish up my high school education. And that's where I really transformed. Like I went from, being 150 kilos to being like 100, 70 kilos, less than 70 kilos. Like Bruce Lee, I remember it was 148 pounds. So literally my kilo ratio to
uh,
pound ratio was equivalent. So I went from 150 kilos down to 148 pounds. Now the fact that I'm back up to 140, 35 kilos is not a good thing. I need to get back in shape. But the truth is, I've been through that journey, that cycle of transformation, and it was a very powerful thing. It taught me my lessons in life. That's what kind of gave me the trajectory towards doing what I did. My first life was, of course, I was deeply passionate and excited about health and well-being because of the transformation, right? So I remember my first dream was to become a model, and my parents were like over our dead body. So I was like, okay, now I have a conundrum of how am I going to do this, And the truth is, I didn't want to be a model. That was just a means to an end, and kind of like an ego fantasy of now that I've lost all this weight and I look like a certain way, I'm going to show the world. So I'm really
yeah,
actually quite happy that that I didn't take that route. I didn't go down that route. And it was around after high school that I came back to India, where I was completely transformed. I was looking at this new life as a so-called model, ramp model. I was too short. That I looked at myself and said, I don't know if this is what I want to do. And, but I was egoic. I was driven by the ego. And then it's around that time that unfortunately I hurt myself. Um, I hurt myself in the sense that my life's pain became something that was core to my experience. I hurt my back. And all of a sudden, I had to watch what I had built over 2 years, meaning, meaning what I had worked so hard for 2 years, just completely fall in front of me. So I had to find the inner strength to, and in India, unlike America, where they're very usually politically correct, in India, they'll tell you, oh my God, you're losing your muscle, you're not looking as strong as you used to. And that really played mind games with me. So that's when I actually went into the heart of darkness for the first time. I was only 19 and I experienced depression, you know, and this was the hardest moment in time in my life. When I experienced depression, I realized that I'm only human and I'm not this grandiose Greek god sculpture. and that I have to live a life that's true to myself and in service of others and not one that others expect of me. And that was the greatest lesson. And so what I did was I actually got so kind because my parents, God bless our family values in India, they believed in me. They didn't give up because I was really depressed. And they brought me to America to, um, avert what could have potentially been a tragedy at the time because I really didn't believe like I belonged or I was needed. And there was this place at where point at which I declared that to my family that maybe there's no need for me to be on this earth, and maybe just being gone is better than, being on earth. And it was a very tough time. And I think this is a pandemic that's plaguing us here and now in India, especially with, Sushant Singh's passing. And I don't know if it feels like it was suicide, but regardless of, what the circumstances are, I feel like suicide is something that's plaguing us here and now. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, being a mental health advocate and helping people that suffer that dark night of the soul to come out, because you do need support and you can't do it all on your own, you know. And that's something I learned too. And so then from being a wannabe model, I went into the fashion industry, and that's where I kind of realized or trained for what I do now in designing extraordinary experiences for fashion shows. And I worked with some of the best in the industry. And I went to Parsons School of Design. That's where I graduated undergrad from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
By the
But I
way,
think,
you and I
yeah.
have that in common, and I did
Oh,
not
really?
know that. No, no, not the fashion industry. I had my
Okay.
first suicide attempt when I was in college at IIT,
Oh
and I
my
was
God.
20 in 1984. Uh, and again, it wasn't like I wanted to kill myself. I was like begging for attention, so I just cut
Yeah.
myself, and the rest is history. But
Yeah.
it was seen as a biological problem rather than
Yeah.
a psychotherapeutic intervention, and there were no psychotherapists in India in 1984. There
Yeah.
were
There weren't.
none.
You're right. None in 1997 either. Literally, my
Uh,
parents,
that's
poor things,
changed.
they had
That's
to,
changed now,
yeah,
but there were
that's
none
changed.
at that time.
There were none at that time. And
So,
God bless my doctor, and this is where it gets really interesting. Um, yeah, no, I agree. I totally understand what you mean. It's that attention, and touch wood, I never had to, I contemplated it, but I never acted on it, but I think you're right. It's that moment in time when you feel alone, desperately alone, and you need someone or something, some force that kind of calls to you, right? And knows that you belong and you're needed. And that's the most powerful feeling on earth, is to know that you belong and you're needed.
and I'm
Um,
so glad you're alive, and so am I, to tell the
yeah,
story.
yeah,
I just read a statistic that in India, more than 7% of young people,
mm,
teenagers and adults, young adults, 7% commit suicide among the people dying. 7% are cases of suicide. So it is an epidemic. And
yeah.
there's a lot of work going on, but there's going to be a need
So much
for
more,
more
so much more.
intervention, culture change.
Yeah. And
Um,
also pioneers and influencers like yourself, that say that, are a beacon of hope for the youngsters who feel the pressure. Because at 18, we kind of put the world on our shoulders in a way that, it's unrealistic. The grandiosity, the hopes, the dreams, and then with that same ferocity, I don't believe suicide is an illness. I
no,
believe it's more than an illness. I believe it's like a illnesses can be cured. Suicides can actually go down a dark path that there's no cure. you know so that's why you need an intervention that's so powerful that it stops it in its track. It's almost like this divine surgery that needs to happen, for that person to come out of that dark night of the soul.
the dark
And
night
so
of the
for
soul.
me, when they talk about suicide as a mental illness, I feel like no, it's actually more than that. It's a problem that needs to be addressed from all angles of the spectrum. and to be seen as a crisis that needs to be averted without fear. Because people are so taboo and they're like, oh, let's not talk about that. And I think the more we talk about it, the more we understand it, the more we intervene, the more we're going to get out of a sickness mindset, and the more we're going to go into a cure mindset and prevent and cure. And if you can prevent a suicide, you've saved a soul. Unlike illness, where you can do your best with science, the truth is, with suicide, you can actually prevent a suicide, and you've literally saved a soul that's intact.
Yeah.
So for me, deeply passionate about changing the narrative around suicide and how it's taboo and it's something that shouldn't be, talked about, to something where it's about sharing and acknowledging and building resonance around suffering, to build that compassion, to build that altruism, to build that shared empathy that's necessary in the world here and now. And I mean, fast forward a decade from there, I was invited back to India after working in the US as a fashion designer and all of the other extraordinary endeavors of well-being and holistic medicine and health, to work with Dr. Cherian. And he also, unfortunately, committed suicide in 2006. And he was like a father figure,
You mean
and I don't know
Dr.
if you
Cherian
remember.
from the Amul group? Or
Madras, from
oh,
Dr. TJ Cherian, who was Dr. KM Cherian's mentor. He was one of the first, India's first cardiologists. He was like a father figure. And when he passed away, when he committed suicide, that's what really taught me that you're the only human. Because, in India, we elevate our elders, and especially people who've saved everyone's life, including my own, my mom, my dad, my grandmom. They're like gods, right? We look at them as like higher beings. And his act of, loss in my life, his tragic ending really taught me that we're only human. And that was the most powerful lesson I ever learned, was that we're only human, and we really, at the end of the day, we want to belong and we want to feel needed. And when I lost him, that's what actually set me, because I'd never thought, I mean, in my wildest dreams, my dream was, I'm going to be Iron Man by day, work for my father, I'm going to be a healer by night, work for Dr. Cherian. I'll have this hospital that I co-lead with Dr. Cherian. We would create the world's first in the sense in India, integrative medical center that had a state-of-the-art fitness facility, had extraordinary Ayurveda, yoga, and martial arts that meets the rehab of ICU patients, heart patients, diabetes. So I was really excited about that journey. And then all of a sudden, in a click of a moment, my life changed in 2006, March 3rd. And I'll never forget, when I lost him, I felt like I had lost everything. But then over time, I've realized that he lives in me. And that was the greatest lesson I learned as time went by and I was working on all my endeavors. Like, he sits on my shoulder, as a guardian angel, and he guides me, and he believes, in my life's journey and purpose. And I would have never gone down the route of being a global health scientist, working in the slums of Mumbai, working in the deaf and dying ward of the palliative care ward of the California Pacific Medical Center, CPMC, in Sutter Health at the Institute for Health and Healing. I would have never, experienced life in every breath the way I have. So his loss has really fueled my life's work in serving others and serving something that's much larger than myself. And that's kind of like where I came to when I met you at Stanford, place for compassion and altruism. And then I actually had a huge transformation happen when I got into business school. That was kind of like a dream come true in 2011. Then I finished B school. And after I did B school, I'll never forget, that's when I did my first ever TEDx in San Francisco in 2011. And I actually dedicated it to Dr. Cherian to reimagine global health and well-being in our world. and the title was 7 billion well. Now, you see,
Wow.
yeah, at UCSF, we were taught, basically, we were trained for this moment in time, COVID-19. That's the whole point of global health science and global health scientists and public health officials. It's to be prepared for this moment where we have a human crisis, or a virus of this magnitude affect life on land and life in every aspect of our being. And I look back and I circle back around and I'm like, wow, what a life, and what a circle of life. Um, and since then, of course, I've done, TEDx at San Francisco was my first, and I dreamed really big, and I did TEDx at the United Nations. Um, and since then, I've really just been in service of creating experiences that empower voices on the planet and stories on the planet, both from the top of the pyramid to the very top, as well as the bottom. And I believe both places are very lonely, can be very lonely. I don't believe people at the top are always happy and safe. Yes, they have a level of abundance that's definitely nowhere compared to the ones at the bottom. But I feel like there is this thread that binds us in the human experience, which is about belonging and feeling needed. And that's what I focus on very much in my life's work as a curator and a social entrepreneur and, high impact philanthropist. I believe in the power of giving. I believe in the power of becoming a go-giver. How do you go from being a go-getter to becoming a go-giver? So that you lead with giving and you make giving the norm. Because God knows here and now, if the virus is going to teach us anything, it should be to live life in service of something larger than us, to protect the planet. See, we the people are important, but I feel like we the people have failed. So how do we go and serve something that's larger than ourselves? And that's where, I started We the Planet, was to really live a life that's true to yourself while living in your, you know, true divine purpose or dharma while serving something that's larger than you. So that's very much, where I've, dedicated my life's work and purpose towards realizing that vision.
Well, Kunal, first of all, thank you. I mean, I always talk about the external resume and the inner resume. The external
Yeah,
resume is all nice, same with me. It all sounds good, IIT and Iowa, Stanford, in your case, also Parsons School of Design and
yeah,
GSB and all that. And then there's that inner experience. And I wouldn't label it as good or bad. It is being human, it's being real. And the challenges
being
that we
authentic.
all face. I mean, I don't know any hero or anybody who made it to anywhere in the world who did not suffer. But I also don't know anybody who is on the streets who did not suffer. So that thread of dukkha or suffering, in
Yeah,
fact, it's funny, the Hindi word suffer means journey.
you're
Jivan
right.
ka safar is
Yeah,
journey.
suffer.
So
Yeah.
suffering is an inherent part of the journey of life.
My
If I were
God,
to pun on it.
I've never thought of that. You're right. Suffer means, like, if you literally try, like did a one-to-one comparison, means journey. And yeah, my life's, my hero's journey, if you want to call it that, really began with a lot of suffering and pain and isolation and being the Black Labrador, and then, being bullied, and then having to become the bully's bully to protect myself, and then protecting those that were more vulnerable than me. So from, being a Black Labrador, I morphed into a Black Panther, and that Black Panther was a very sacred guardian and protector of the vulnerable and the vulnerable communities.
Looks like our screen is freezing right now, but it'll come back. This happens a lot with Zoom these days. Are you able to hear me? Hopefully, we'll be back soon. And here you are. So this happens a
Yeah,
lot on Zoom lately. It's
yeah.
nice. internet that's unstable, but we'll get through this. You were talking of
Yeah.
Black Labrador and Black Panther, so please repeat that, and I'll edit this part out. So
Yeah,
you
no,
took
I was,
from being a Black
wow,
Labrador
we've
to a
only
Black
got,
Panther.
can you imagine how time flies? We've only got 10 minutes, but yeah, no, um, so I was saying that, in my life, I, I started out suffering personally because of the outlier I was, the misfit. And because I was bullied, and because I was bullied, I was like this black Labrador that loved and needed love and was loyal and affectionate, and I was outcast, right? And then worse, then I was bullied by these so-called, cool kids in private school when I was in another school and then from being bullied, I had to become the bully's bully, because there was only one of me and there were like four of them, because bullies come in packs, they don't come in ones. It's not like a one-to-one combat, they always come with their little henchmen. And so from being a black lab, I had to have this transformation happen where I morphed into a Black Panther. And this new avatar, I realized I had omnipotent power. I wasn't weak, right? And with that power, I realized comes a lot of responsibility. And that's when I learned to protect the vulnerable in school. And all these vulnerable kids came to me for protection because they didn't have anyone that could fight on their behalf. So I became kind of like this guardian protector. I got in a lot of trouble too, because when you're protecting against the bullies who belong to the most powerful families in school, you're literally going up against the status quo, right? But the truth is, what I learned was very powerful, because one was that every human being has the ability to rise above their challenges, um, or at least try your best to do so. Because if you die trying, you will have lived a life worth living, deep meaning, purpose, and most importantly, one of impacting lives. Because I believe today, now, here and now, it's more important that we impact 1 billion lives versus just make $1 billion. That $1 billion is not going to translate into the massive impact you can have directly. You have to focus on life in every breath and really focus on changing other people's lives for the better. And for me, at that time when I was a kid, it was, going from Black Labrador mode into Black Panther mode and protecting those that were weaker and vulnerable. And that's how I did it. And I feel like now, touch wood, I don't have to like be a guardian of that sort, but because it would get me a lot of trouble. But now I feel like as a curator of the future, my my life's work is very centered around protecting the planet and those on the planet by curating extraordinary experiences that empower people's voices, because we all have a voice, we all have a story, we all have a need to be heard, and a right to be heard, whether it's uh, the more vulnerable groups on the street, to the high voices in the tower. I believe every voice counts and every life counts.
So you were curating TEDx talks for a while, United Nations and in San Francisco and all that. And now you're doing a new initiative. Tell us about that. Decade of
Oh yeah,
Transformation, X
yeah.
Impact.
So my Magnum Opus venture. Of course, I have Novus and hashtag We the Planet, um, which are two really exciting endeavors that I've had in the past. But my Magnum Opus venture is actually three. It's a trifecta. I launched something called X Fellows, which is like the real world version of the X-Men. And alongside that, I have X Impact, which is my holding company, which is focused on the next decade of transformations. The X actually translates to a decade, right? Because the X is also a decade of massive transformation, impact, and action on the ground. And with that, I'm creating this really special gurukul, or school for the next level of engagement, where we come together and transform the world, right? And we do it without fear or favor. The goal is to create the next level of citizenship. So how do we go from being global citizens to extraordinary citizens? I believe That is the fundamental transformation that has to happen here and now. We must go from this idea of just being global to being extraordinary stewards of our planet. And that's at the heart of X Impact and X Fellows. It's how do we lead without fear or favor? How do we make the impossible possible? How do we cultivate that mindset that even if you don't have a dollar or you have billions of dollars, you are very focused on the idea of making the impossible possible to better people's lives on the planet. And so the X Fellows is really that bold idea of coming together despite your flaws, because that's the whole idea of the X-Men is, they're not perfect. They have this superpower or this gift, but they're flawed, and they don't feel like they necessarily fit in. So it's almost like a conspiracy theory for all the misfits and the outliers, but one of impact and goodwill, and not one of wanting to take over the world, or it's not a secret society per se. It's just really about unlocking your exponential potential and doing it both as an individual, so you stand strong on your own, but then as a collective, so you become a super organism. So, back to back, side by side, and always having each other's backs. That's what the X Fellows is all about, or the X Fellowship is all about.
And can you tell us a little bit about how it works? It sounds fascinating.
So it's a good question. That's even what I'm trying to figure out is how it works. Herding big cats and small cats are all the same. It's a lifetime of learning. But the way it works is that you're brought into one of my experiences, be the Planet Novus, Summit X, X Impact Summit, X Summit, whatever, Tribeca, all these things that I partner with, TED, Singularity University. And then I try to find those few people that I feel I can identify as not perfect, but there's something there. There's something special that you see. It's not like they have a resume and they might have not even come first, second, third place in their respective fields, whether it's the Olympics or school or life. They might be fourth, fifth, sixth, but they have something there. There's that X factor. There's something that they have that no one else saw, right? And for me, that is an X Fellow. That's how it works. To identify that gift and then nurture it with them to allow them to transform themselves and the world. And that's, I think, in a nutshell, how it works at the beginning. If we had more time, I would tell you how it works in a system framework.
I'm sure we'll need to have another session to go deeper into this because it's so precious. And as you said, it's an evolutionary process. So it's going to be different next time I talk to you.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that people realize that it's an evolution, as is humanity, as is the human experience. Nothing's perfect. But I think what is extraordinary is that you have the will. And this is something my doctor taught me before he passed away. He said to me in his beautiful voice, when there is a will, there is a way. So I believe that is at the center of who we are here and now with COVID-19 and the suffering of humanity. And I do believe we'll burn through the virus and we'll come out the other side stronger than we've ever been before. Because when there is a will, there is a way. So we must harness that will, both left and right. We must unite, we must become one. And it's impossible. But after all, life should be about making the impossible possible, right? So for me, it's about that. It's about bringing the left and the right, the disabled and the abled, women and men, all of us together.
Yeah, I like to use the phrase to discover the androgynous self within. It's not about being male or female, strong or weak, or developed or developing countries. It's only when we can all come together as human and as living beings and sentient beings that there's a possibility. And there's no right without the left. So left cannot be left out and right cannot be always right. So they have to come together.
Exactly.
I know you're running out of time and we will be in touch. And we will share your contact information, especially about your new initiatives,
Yeah,
Accept,
please.
and so that if people want to contact you directly, they can approach you there. I'll also share
Absolutely.
mine. And
Yeah.
please stay in touch. And yes, I'm always eager to talk to people from various areas of life because that's the only way we can make sense and meaning out of life, especially
Yeah,
now.
it's the deep conversation followed by massive action. Thank
Yes.
you for your,
Thank
thank you
you
for
and
this.
have a
It's been a
great
gift.
day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye
Okay,
now.
great. Wow, perfect timing to say
Yeah,
thank
I better
you.
let you go before you get late for your next meeting.
No, no, it's wonderful. And thank you so much for this. It was such a blessing.
And I
And
really
let's,
appreciate how direct and you did not hide anything.
yeah,
I'm yet to do my interview because something is holding me back. I think somebody has to provoke me. चाबी
uh,
चाबी की जरूरत है.
let me help you provoke and let me help that process. And I'd love for you to help me too, because you've got so much wisdom and compassion, and I really appreciate you. So
Thank
thank you
you.
for this gift.
Thank you.
Huh?
And
Chalo.
I will come and meet you in New York, if not in Bombay. We'll see you
Love
soon.
that.
See you
Love
soon.
that. Okay,
Okay.
God bless.